thus far, but I first want to start with some good news, which I think is important as well. So last week, the schematics and financing of SDSU's new state-of-the-art sciences building to replace the North Life Sciences were unanimously approved by the CSU Board of Trustees. And this was made possible by a very generous gift of $20 million from Jessica Swirlitz to support the capital construction, which is beginning immediately. And I have to say, it is unusual to get that kind of funding without any constraints directly to support construction. So this new building is going to be named after Jessica's parents, the Duran Sciences Building, and it will include wet labs, computer labs, instructional labs, faculty offices, and collaborative space for faculty and students. So very excited about that. Some of you may remember when I came here in 2018, one of the first items I put on the list for the capital projects, which is a master plan that's provided to the CSU, was the North Life Sciences Building renewal. And it was one of those unfortunate realities that we did not have at the system level, the capital fund. So we kind of sat there for a while. And if it weren't for the fact that we were successful in this particular fundraising level of securing the philanthropic gifts, we probably would still be number 11 in this queue. So I just think we wanted to start with that positive note. I know Jeffrey Roberts, the dean's here. He was playing an integral role in the planning with the faculty. I want to thank the faculty in the College of Sciences that were actively involved in the planning of the building as well. So we're hoping to begin construction, or actually starting construction. We hope to open in 2027. So that's the good news. Now I want to shift briefly. I think the last 2 weeks in higher education have been incredibly challenging and difficult. Obviously, there are challenges to Title VI and Title IX. Most recently, of course, about the Department of Education and implications for that in terms of federal funding, freezes, unfreezes, pauses and pauses. To those pauses, questions about the future of academic research and, of course, funding for the diverse populations we serve. We're also closely following all the debates and discussions about immigration policy and are ensuring that we're doing everything we can to support our community, regardless of their status or background. I know that many of you here are fiercely protective of the public mission and good of the institution and take seriously the responsibility to both educate tens of thousands of students while generating real, tangible, and lasting impact. So universities like ours remain crucial for driving new ideas and innovations, promoting social mobility for our students, and economic development for the state and the nation. So in the midst of this uncertainty and change, I emphasize to you in no uncertain terms the importance of our role in promoting civic participation and social cohesion is unchanged. Our teachings and our efforts to encourage critical thinking, to expose students to diverse perspectives, and to instill values of citizenship and community service are unchanged. Our responsibility to innovate and contribute to advancements that improve the quality of life for the communities we serve and the world remains unchanged. So I want to underscore our ongoing commitments to and prioritization of our meeting the needs of our large, complex, multi-location university and our highly diverse community of students, faculty, and staff. Our strategic plan, institutional mission, commitment to our One SDSU community remains important priorities. But what this often comes down to are the details. So I have asked VP Mondinot to walk us through some of what has been happening related to federal research funding and how DRI and the RF are navigating these new orders in a higher education landscape. So Hala, could you take it away?
Yes, absolutely. Good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you, President De La Torre, for ceding your time to me. As you can imagine, we've heard from many of our faculty, both in the Division of Research and Innovation and San Diego State University Research Foundation. from our faculty that are confused and concerned about the executive orders, the memos that have been issued since January 20th. And from our perspective, it's obviously a period of significant transition and uncertainty, and is very fluid. It's changing constantly, which is why you're seeing multiple emails coming from us throughout every week with updates as they are occurring. So not only is SDSU and the Research Foundation doing the monitoring, but also we have our leadership across the campus and the CSU and our colleagues across the United States and the organizations we belong to, helping us to provide updates and guidance. So to give you kind of a general update, on January 20th, the president signed an order entitled Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DI Programs and Preferencing. On January 21, he signed an order entitled Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunities. As you can imagine, those orders represent a very dramatic shift in the federal landscape. So many of the federal agencies themselves included DI goals in their calls for proposal for at least the last decade. And many require that our PIs and our institution provide clear statements on how we address DI as part of accepting and receiving these grants from the agencies. So the first order is predominantly directed at the agencies themselves and the employees of the federal government, and as well as federal contractors who have received federal funding to provide or advance DI, DIA, or environmental justice programs, services, or activities since January 20, January 20, 2021. And federal contractors who've provided DI training or DI training materials to agencies or department employees. Now, what we don't know is how this is moving down to the university levels and how this order specifically will impact. But from the agencies themselves, it is about the way it is ordered is to terminate to the maximum extent allowed by law all DI or DEIA performance requirements for contractors and grantees. Again, this is directed at the agencies to direct to us. The order itself does not define the term DEI or DIA or equity related. So how agencies may define it, how they ask us to address it may look different. One example, it could be that it required PIs to no longer include these statements around DI into their grant submissions. The second order prohibits federal agencies from engaging in the following in awarding government contracts: promoting diversity, requiring contracts, including subcontractors, to practice affirmative action, and encouraging workforce balancing based on inherent characteristics. It also prohibits federal contractors from considering race, color, sex, sexual preference, religion, or national origin in ways that violate the nation's civil rights laws. It further directs agencies to, one, terminate all discriminatory and illegal preferences, mandates, policies, programs, activities, guidance, regulations, enforcement actions, consent orders, and requirement, and two, to enforce longstanding civil rights law, and three, combat private sector DI preferences, mandates, policies, programs, and activities. So at this point, I mean, this is a lot of language, right? At this point, I want to clarify a couple important things. One, we're in California, and in California, we've had California Prop 209 that has been a law for almost 30 years. Proposition 209 amended the California Constitution to prohibit public colleges and universities and other government entities from discriminating or granting preferences based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, national origin as a criteria in public employment, public contracting, public education already. And many legal scholars are arguing that as long as California universities are engaging in work which is compliant with that Prop 209, we're already compliant with much of the language that is in these executive orders. The other is that the orders themselves don't always go into effect immediately. And some legal challenges have already been filed and many more are expected. I'll just give you one important one is a federal court issued temporary restraining order directing federal granting agencies to not pause, freeze, impede, block, cancel, or terminate awards. This basically essentially pauses the pause, allowing federal dollars to flow again in accordance with the terms and of the contracts and awards that have been received by the university. So for these reasons, the guidance and the information we have shared with RPIs has been dynamic, and we will continue to respond carefully and in close coordination with our system and other partners. But what we've been sending to our faculty, and I will continue to reiterate it, is that despite this shifting federal environment, we encourage our researcher to submit required deliverables and reports on time as these impact their project continuing and future funding. Given the temporary restraining order, PIs should still continue to fund all their funding activities as awarded by their grants and contract and the terms that were agreed upon in the original agreement. Researchers should also work with our grant specialists to submit no-cost extension or fund carryover requests, and continue submitting proposals and check for updated submission deadlines, while being sure to review award terms that are coming in. If any guidance is coming to you or request or pause or any email is coming directly to you, stop work orders, anything, please send them to the San Diego State Research Foundation at our usual email, sdsurfcommunications@sdsu.edu, and copy your grant specialists for verification and guidance. That same email is a great place to email for questions and guidance. We're happy to respond to them. And I'll give a huge shout out to Michelle, who's done a massive amount of one-on-ones with faculty who had direct questions during the pause. But reminding everybody that this is ever-changing situation and the information from federal agencies may be incomplete. Any guidance may change or even reverse very quickly. I like to give this as an example. Michelle and I were ready to press the button on our first email to tell faculty to pause, and 15 minutes before it went out, we had the temporary freeze of that. So we had to redo our message yet again, right? So it is literally within minutes sometimes that we're getting updated guidance. Definitely, as a result, be careful not to take immediate action without first seeking consultation with our teams. And I'll end by saying, as an institution that's been long committed to an inclusive and equitable environment, we're committed to upholding our core values while also consulting with experts to understand potential impacts given these new policy environments. I'll clarify a little bit more that point to say that there are components when they come to us that are federal and state laws that we have to abide with that are being challenged. And so we will abide with, we will send you those memos, we will abide by them, but we will also be working coordinated efforts across the country to fight for these to be addressed. And so I'll stop there and I'll take questions. I see hands up. And Michelle is here as well if there are questions to the foundation, not me.
Okay, thank you. So the first hand up is Chair Lack, you're recognized.
Thanks so much. And I really appreciate you taking time to speak to us today about the ever-changing landscape. I'm sure your office has been in utter chaos over this, and so really appreciate you taking the time. It's my understanding that at least some of our PIs were sent an email from, I guess, from the Research Foundation asking them to report specific DEIA activities. And I wanted to know a little bit more about that because on the surface that seems almost, it seems concerning that it's a preemptive effort to stop those activities. And I'd like to hear some reassurance specific about how you intend to support our researchers in continuing to do their equity-minded work. Thank you.
So thank you, Pam, and Michelle, you can jump in if I don't cover everything, but we did not preemptively do any requests. We actually received a cease or work order on DEI and DIA activities. And when we have federal requirements, we must pause the work on those things. That was reversed, or the temporary restraining orders put that back on pause, which is why we told faculty in the last email, you can resume all grant activities as awarded already. But when it's what I was trying to nuance earlier is like, we have to follow federal law. And when there's federal law to pause components, we absolutely have to stop those while they get litigated, because they will get litigated. So it was not in preemptive. And I've been actually, the term I've been using with my colleagues, not but only internally, but externally, is we do not want to start doing anticipatory obedience, right? Like, we're not going out and doing more than we need to do. That's absolutely not what our approach has been, and nor will we ever approach it that way. Rather, our approach is when we have federal guidelines that require us to stop, we'll stop, and we will work with our colleagues to litigate. In terms of how we're supporting faculty, honestly, because there's no pause right now, it's really hard to answer the question. We need to see how far it goes. But obviously, as I said, and as you heard the president say, we're committed to all of those core values as an institution. So we'll have to see what that pause, if at all, ends up looking, to really understand how we reframe and we rework and figure out how to support faculty. But our anticipation right now is that, well, not anticipation, our situation right now is that it's not paused and people can do their work.
And can I just add in here that the way some of the language coming from the various federal agencies to us last week was worded was that you needed to cease immediately any DEI related activities. And so the outreach we did was to say, you know, you're funded by this agency. Is there any activities that you have concerns about? Please contact us so we can talk them through and figure out if there's any actions needed. So, you know, it came sort of fast and furious. We just had a few programs, and then it was sort of flooding in. And so we were trying to get people to tell us, hey, I don't need your assistance because I have nothing, or I do need your assistance, so that we could really focus our resources on helping those people who could potentially be impacted. But like Hala said, the pause has been paused. And so right now we're encouraging people to continue their work until we know more.
Thank you. Senator Sharma, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I don't know who can answer my question. It is related to DEI, of course, when these things are passed, and I think our university does receive federal grants, right? And many of the DEI activities may be somehow related. Plus, we are hiring faculties. We ask them to submit DEI document, right? To when submit the application. So how this will be impacted, or it is not going to be impacted because we are California State University, have nothing to do with the federal indirect, even though we may receive federal grant. Is there any clarification, or just
Can you
not worry
repeat
too much?
clarification on what? Like, if it impacts the federal grants and the federal grants are paused, that's
So
different.
yeah, so if federal grant, remember, as a university, we receive federal grants, right? And those federal grants may have impact because they're coming from this. If you are only getting California State University grant, then we are fine because we are not dealing with federal. But if you are receiving those federal grants and we have DI activities, like even if, let's say, we are hiring a faculty member, we ask them to submit each applicant must submit the DI statement. So how those will be impacted in this situation, because this may be going throughout the state to the other state, and how these things make sense?
I would say, I'm going to take a stab at answering, but I would say you're asking us to predict a little bit how this is going to change, and we really can't predict what the federal landscape looks like. Like, literally every day it's changing. So hard for us to make an assessment before it actually happens. So whether they change the rules and say campuses that have any DIA plans will not be funded, we haven't seen any language to that effect. And I don't see that coming down in the way that, I mean, I can't predict it, I should say. I don't know what will come, but we'll have to take it one step at a time and see how far this goes. and respond appropriately at the time. Yeah, that would be my answer. Michelle,
You
if
know,
you-
I just
Thank you,
want to
thank you.
add,
I think-
Satish, remember in the system, we will have legal counsel. So right now, the Office of General Counsel of the CSU system is deeply embedded in interpreting the executive laws as well as state laws, because we have to abide by both. It isn't just one or the other, as well as CSU policy. So in anything we do, we have to confer with OGC. So it isn't going to be done independently, because in a system the size of the CSU or the UC, if we act independently, that could have consequences for the broader system. So if anything, I would say that we're going to be very diligent in ensuring that whatever guidance we give you is consistent with what we legally can do, right? And what we cannot do, we will also be clear about.
Good, good. It's glad that it is not impacted. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised at this point. So then I'm gonna thank you, VP Malinak and also Goetz for your feedback, and I'm gonna refer back to President.
Yes.
Delatorre.
So I do believe I have a few times. So one of the things that I did share with Chair Butler Bird was several years ago when I came as president in 2018, we had a shared governance committee, and that group I think was really important in informing how we were going to move forward with shared governance. What I thought is that the importance of shared governance, particularly for our campus, is critical, particularly in these times where there is confusion, fear, a lot of things changing. As I said, it's almost like that COVID moment where we were trying to figure things out while we're doing it. And I think what's important for us to understand is that I think this is a time for us to lean in to shared governance. So what I've asked her is to provide some recommendations from the Senate so that we could reconvene this meeting and it's this group. And at the time, I was very much involved. As a reminder, the importance of shared governance is really the process of consultation. That indeed, you know, we're getting the opinions on different areas, whether it's budget, whether it's policy, in a way that is constructive, respectful, and that allows us to move forward in these conversations so that we can be secure in protecting the mission, protecting our you know, academic freedom, and also do well by our broader campus community. So what I wanted to do is ensure, particularly, you know, when I looked at and saw the response with, you know, the not radical, it was actually an unfortunate response that occurred with the Sonoma State cuts that I think everyone has seen. You know, it was difficult. These are difficult decisions when we have to make decisions at the level of a president. So what I would say is this is a time for us to reconvene as a community and create this particular group. So I want us to be very prudent and careful in our planning. I want us to bring together people who are willing to have this conversation. But I also want to remind in our shared governance that what we're talking about is robust conversation, but we're not talking about shared management decisions. And I think that's important to understand, largely because as a president, day in and day out, I am making management decisions. I oftentimes want to make sure that I can share every decision, but some decisions, quite frankly, are confidential. Some are not open for discussion. Some require immediate response, like when we had to deal with the fires situation, and I had to make sure that Snapdragon was available for our firefighters to leave their equipment. So these are things that I think are important to understand in this discussion. The other thing that I think is important, that it makes me incredibly proud about this institution, is that we are honed in using evidence-based approaches, looking at data, you know, treating each other with mutual respect and transparency. So I think it's an important time for us to really safeguard ourselves in terms of our integrity. It's important to enhance our resilience. And I say that because we are going to have a rocky time. I want to be really forthright about this. We haven't, not many presidents have had to deal with this type of environment where the speed of change at the level of the federal government is really upturning many of the regular processes, right? One needs only think about the Department of Education and what could happen, not simply in terms of our grants, but in terms of access to Pell, to work study, to student subsidized loans and the implications for all of that. These are really, really, I think, challenging times. So I just wanted to highlight that I have asked you to do this. It is something that, you know, I will be actively involved in. I also wanted to share with you that I was very much engaged with the chairs. We had our retreats. We talked about the reality of the moment, particularly with the budget situation. And all of us are going to work together to ask our electeds in the context of the 8% budget cut that will have an effect on us as well as any other institution. We also want to make sure that we are prompt in our discussion of the commitment to fund the compact growth, that San Diego State will no doubt have to be part of the 4 schools that have the capacity, meaning the demand and interest for enrollment growth. And we're going to have to be involved in that process. But I think what's important to understand is that we are in an environment where when we think about what occurred with the LA fires, and most recently the fact that State Farm Insurance is talking about increasing insurance rates 22% because of the risk, what occurred and their ability to continue coverage in California, that we are going to be in difficult conversations across the board. That being said, you know, and I use this, I think, analogy with the SEC, but I've used it many times. We're at the point where Maslow's hierarchy of needs is at the forefront of thought and decision-making for our electeds, meaning those who are most vulnerable will most likely have a priority within the context of the state budget. What that means, and this is my crystal ball is it is going to be harder for us in higher education to make the case. I don't think we will be unsuccessful if we can link what we do with our ecosystem of community that we so critically support, right? And I do think that there is a place for San Diego State to make that argument forcefully. But I do think in order to enhance transparency, in order to create an environment where we can create the kind of leverage that we need to create this committee and bring it back together. And we need to be thoughtful in this process. And we need to bring people who are willing to give and take in a respectful manner, not point fingers, but create the opportunity for us to meet this challenge head on. So I just want to, again, take a moment to tell you that we are continuing to be aligned with our mission. We're not shifting. In fact, embedded in the mission is an appreciation and understanding of the human experience, both globally and through the ages. I think that line is apropos now. It's apropos more than ever. And I want to ensure you that we will do everything to enhance teaching and excellence in research. I do think that we are in a unique position, and that position is one where we will continue to grow. And with growth comes greater opportunity. I want to ensure that we will continue moving forward. And I just want to be sure that your participation, your voice is included in that process. So I'm going to leave it with that. And I think I now have to turn it over to the provost because do we have minutes?
Well, actually, yeah, we can hold on. I need to try to squeeze in President Hernandez because I overlooked her presentation, and then we'll go back to.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, that's on me. So, President Hernandez, President Hernandez, are you still with us? Oh, there you are. Thank you. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Is my camera facing weird?
We can see you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so another quick report today. So I'm just going to talk for a second about our AS elections. So we have our Associated Students elections starting very soon. Their deadline to submit their applications is February 14th, I believe. So it's coming up very quickly. And we offer both elected and appointed positions. So the difference between elected and appointed, I'm sure you all are very aware in your own aspects, but the elected are elected by all students. So all students have the opportunity to vote and choose who they see as best fit for each role. And then appointed is are like interview based and appointed within their own commissions, councils, and more of an interview process. And I'm sorry, there's something in my eye. And for elections, you'll see a lot of students doing walkarounds, or they'll ask to come and present to your classroom. I do really recommend allowing them the space to do that just so that their student bodies can feel more educated and well-rounded on the students that are being elected for these roles so that they understand who is running for these roles and who could potentially be leading their government. So if you do get the opportunity to hear from a student or group of students asking to talk a bit about AS and campaign, I graciously ask you to give them the space to do that, as it's really exciting. And yeah, we're also currently in the process of gathering information and spreading the word on resources for undocumented students, faculty, and staff. That way we're also as educated as possible at this time in associated students. And then lastly, the SDSU contingency was huge at the Martin Luther King Junior Parade. There were over 100 people, I believe, walking with SDSU. So we were easily the largest group there. And it was really cool to see so many people come out and support. And yeah, any questions?
Thank you. I'm not seeing any hands raised at this point in time, but thank you so much for your patience and persistence, President Hernandez. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too.
Thank you. We will now transition back to VP Wong Nickerson and AVP Little, the budget report.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having us here today. I'm going to give a very high-level overview of the budget, and then Crystal will go in to give a deeper dive. So the governor has announced a preliminary budget on January 10th. At that time, there's one small piece of good news for CSU, which originally the governor said, 7.95% cut for CSU was supposed to be $397 million. It turned out that number has some formula error. So that number now is a little bit smaller, but still very substantial. Now that number has gone down to $375 million, which is still a very deep cut for CSU. So that's only one good news out of that budget announcement. But mostly the bad news are last summer, the governor has already announced that there would be a 7.95% general fund cut to CSU. And unfortunately, that cut stays in the budget. In addition to that, the 5% compact for 25-26, which is about $252 million, will be deferred to fiscal year 27-28, so like 2 years from the time that is supposed to be due. However, CSU is expected to continue to meet all the goals under the compact, including the 1% enrollment growth and things like that. And what is not explicit is, I think 26-27 compact, is also at risk, very likely to be deferred. And the problem is, in 27-28, when the current deferral proposal is supposed to take place, at that time there will be a new governor. So it's really not very realistic to think that, the new governor will necessarily honor, debt from a former governor. So, and also on top of that, currently the state has already forecasted that there would be additional deficits in fiscal year 26-27. They think there will be another $13 billion deficit, and then 27-28, another $19 billion deficit. So the state is struggling, to balance its budget currently. And that's before the fire in Southern California that took place. So I think all in all, we can say the state will continue to struggle with its budget. Having said that, CSU strongly disagrees with the governor's January proposal. At this point, CSU will do a lot of advocacy work, as the president mentioned, talking to elected officials, going to Sacramento to really explain the impact of this deep cut, how it will impact academics, student services, course offerings, and the workforce. And also, it will really put the recent gains that, a lot of campuses, including ours, on graduation rate, student success, enrollment growth. It can put all these gains at risk. So while we will continue to do the advocacy work, the advice from the system is each campus need to continue to plan to implement our share of the possible cuts for this coming year. So now I'm going to turn it over to Crystal, and she will go into more detail about the budget.
Thank you, Agnes. I'm going to share my stuff. Can I get permission to share?
You're good.
Okay, thank you. So first, I just want to mention a quick update for the current year budget. The news we received from the governor obviously is for next year's budget. So as it relates to the current year plan, there have been no changes for 24-25. You may recall we provided a 10-year base reduction across the divisions. Each division has been making the progress in achieving that reduction, with each division deploying different strategies within their areas to achieve that reduction while maintaining the essential functions of their unit. So nothing really to share beyond that as it relates to the current year. As it relates to 25-26, Agnes did share that the governor presented his preliminary budget in January, providing an optimistic budget outlook, with state revenues being higher than initially projected, but costs also having increased, which really offset any gains. But the important thing about that balanced budget is that it had already factored in the 8% or 7.95% to the CSU. So didn't really add any good news on our end as a result of continuing to see that reduction in our budget. So just to present it a different way, the CSU had in place with the current governor a 5-year compact, which would provide 5% ongoing base increases to the CSU beginning in 22-23 through 26-27. So the current year is year 3 of that compact, and we expected 2 more years. As it relates to what's been delivered in the January budget proposal, that compact for 25-26, which would have been year 4, has been deferred and would be expected to be allocated in 27-28. However, as Agnes mentioned, there'll be new legislator and governor at that point in time, so it's highly uncertain as to whether or not we would see that materialize in 27-28. And additionally, looking ahead to 26-27, we would expect there could be the potential for an additional deferral, as well as a question mark as to whether we would see any of those funds materialize when they were anticipated to be provided in base. And then as it relates to the one-time repayment, again, deferring it, we would expect to be repaid one time for any investments we would make in achieving the goals of the compact with the deferral. There's also a significant amount of uncertainty around whether or not we would see that repayment if we were to move forward in honoring the deferral of the compact and delivering on the objectives of that compact, which includes a 1% enrollment growth across the CSU system, as well as continued investments in our graduation initiatives and student success. And so the CSU will continue to work with legislation as to whether or not, with the deferral of the compact, they can achieve those goals. And then, as Agnes mentioned, the ongoing reduction, so deferring the compact, meaning that 5% isn't going to happen this year. And in addition to that, adding that $375 million as a base reduction to our budget, which represents that 7.95% of our budget. And then showing it in one more way to look at things. So the Board of Trustees did approve a 6% tuition increase over a period of 5 years. So we will expect that tuition increase to happen again in 25-26. And so while that tuition increase will bring in $164 million, coincidentally, we also have, as a CSU system, baseline commitments. These are things like mandatory costs for utilities, for health insurance, for risk pool for the campus. So basically that tuition increase is being offset by additional cost increases for the system, similar to how for the state, they might have received additional revenues, but they had cost increases that more or less wash those to zero. And so where that leaves us from a budget gap perspective is we still have the $375 million as it relates to the base reduction of the 8%. So what does that look like for SDSU? When we were planning for 24-25, we had planned, as I mentioned, the 10 million base reduction in the current year. There's no change to that, as I mentioned earlier. But looking ahead, based on what we knew a year ago, we anticipated we would have a 3-year reduction strategy, 10 million in year one, the current year, and 5 million in the subsequent 2 years. Based on the 8% cut, we'll need to increase that by 5 million over the next 2 years, meaning the next 2 years we would see a $10 million additional base reduction for 20 million over the next 2 years. Given that those are base reductions and we're phasing in the cut, so even though we have a 30 million cut that we're taking on in 25-26, and over the 3-year period, some of that we already factored in when we were planning for the current year, we will need to draw on our one-time reserves to give us that time to implement those base reductions. And so we can anticipate that in the current year, we did draw on reserves, and for the next couple of years, we'll continue to have to draw on our divisional one-time reserves for probably somewhere in the range of 7 to 12 million to address that funding gap over the next 2 years in each of those years, as well as we would need to delay or reduce our non-essential PBAC allocations, again, giving us that time as we look towards longer-term solutions. So at this point, this is the governor's January preliminary budget information. Obviously, we can anticipate that there'll continue to be updates throughout the budget timeline that happens into the spring with the final June budget later this year. And so we'll provide additional information as that becomes available, and leadership will continue to work on what our internal plans will be before we finalize the budget, usually in that March-April timeline. But a couple other things to consider. Any new general fund reallocation as it relates to enrollment. So you might recall in the current year, we did receive a reallocation from those campuses who were declining in enrollment. So that conversation is happening now, and we hope to have some information from the system over the next several weeks as to whether we'll receive any reallocation of enrollment, which does come with the funding reallocated from those other campuses, as well as any potential compact enrollment growth based on the governor's expectation that we grow 1% enrollment for the compact deferral. The 7.95% base reduction is what we know now. We'll keep an eye on that as we go through the budget cycle and continue to advocate as a system. And then given the increases in divisional reductions over the next couple of years, the divisions will continue to be responsible for how they take that reduction into account within their division. And each division will have the flexibility to deploy different strategies for how they realize that reduction and continue to maintain those essential functions for the campus. And I believe that summarizes where we're at. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. We do have one hand raised, and that's Senator Sherman, you recognize?
Thanks, Chair Butler-Byrd. Thank you for your report. And I have a very specific question that I asked y'all in our Senate Executive Committee a couple of weeks ago, and asked that you bring the answer to Senate to share with us today. And so just for context for the rest of the Senate, the CSU currently, and please correct me if I have this incorrect, is paying almost $500 million, I think $440 million per year to service their debt. on the loans they continue to take out for various projects. And of that almost $500 million, that 440 million per year that the CSU is paying to creditors, I wanted to know what percent and dollar amount goes to paying down the principal on that loan, and what percent and dollar amount of that almost $500 million each year is just paying interest on the loans. Thank you.
Yeah, so we did reach out to the chancellor's office because all the debt program is managed by the chancellor's office. And they actually don't have a good breakdown because 10 years ago, when they got the allocations, so first of all, this is a state allocation very much designated for debt service payment. And every year, the principal and interest number could change because old debt will get paid off and then new debts will be added. And this $440 million debt service is designated to support the system to take a loan to build academic buildings. So that's the only pool of funds that is in CSU budget allocated by the state, specifically for facilities needs. So it's not available for any other purposes. And for large capital project, that's how the funding model it works, right? You go out, you go and borrow money, and then so that you can build, just like buying a home, you don't pay cash upfront. So
Right.
that's the number that, they don't have it because they've never got that number from the state on day one, but they know that they have $440 million in the budget and they need to meet whatever the debt service that they have currently.
Right.
To make it
Well, and
work.
I realize, oh, sorry, AVP. Thank you. And I realize that the CSU actually basically signs an agreement that they will service their debt before they spend a penny on anything else. I just find it astounding and somewhat absurd that several highly paid administrators, and I don't mean yourselves, I mean in the CSU, that are in charge of finance can't answer a basic question like the one I just asked. I think, yeah, telling is the word, as Senator Barboni commented in the chat. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I have to say, in their defense, they tried to get that number from the state, and the state did not provide that to them. So,
Okay, thank you. Senator Shomay, you're recognized.
Thank you. I don't know whether this question should go to the president if she's still there.
No, she
She
left.
left. Okay, so then maybe Agnes can answer that. So if this 7.95% cut is actually going to materialize, I'm wondering what plans there are in the administration, that unit. How are you going to meet those cuts as well? Because there's a lot of talk about cutting classes, cutting programs, cutting this, that, and the other. That's really around, the instructional area, plus staff, of course. But I haven't heard how the administration and that unit will meet the necessary cuts that they need to make. So do you have any insights on that, or is there any talk about that at all in your circles?
yeah, so in 24-25, in the
Mhm.
beginning of the year, each division was given a number to meet that $10 million budget reduction goal. And each division actually has a lot of autonomy, in terms of how they address that reduction, because, each unit is different, right? Academic affairs may have different priorities compared to BFA. So that one, each division has already developed a plan, and it's really a combination of different things. Like in BFA, we have some position that when it's become vacant, we don't fill them. We delay some of the project and we don't do them until we have funding. So each division is different.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you both for your report. We appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be in touch if more questions arise.
Sure, happy to come back. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so the next report, and he's here, is Interim Provost Tom. Please, you're recognized.
Thank you. Before I go to the enrollment slides, let me just give you a quick update on tenure track searches. And as of this week, as of today, we have 9 tenure track lines successfully signed and done out of 54. 2 in arts and letters, 6 in Fowler College of Business, 1 in College of Sciences, and also 1 additional letter is out, waiting for signature. And then 3 and 1 more today, so 4 of them are in negotiation with the deans and the candidates. So far, everything is on track, in progress, and only 1 unsuccessful search so far. So we're moving along in terms of searches. All right, and then about the enrollment, Mario, if you have the slides up. So the next slide, we are looking good for spring enrolled students. As of this week, 36,757. And we will hit 36,757 when we're all done, tracking really well. Let's see. Next slide. All the colleges are meeting their targets, and we are about 2.7% higher than the target so far. And for spring registration. And then next slide, showing you the annualized FTES numbers. As you can see, last summer we had a big jump. Summer 2024, we had 4,700 FTES, and that was a big jump thanks to all the departments who working hard to add more sections, especially not just lower division sections, but also upper division sections. So we were up about 15% in terms of head count compared to previous summer. So we were sitting at 47,706 FTES. And fall and spring, so if you take the annualized number for 24-27, we have 31,800 something, some FTES, right? But total head count is approaching 39,500 or approaching almost 40,000. And next slide. The numbers are looking really good in terms of, on the left-hand side, first-year students, their GPAs are improving. In fact, there was a big jump from 3.18 to 3.28 last year. And our retention rates are really good, 96.3% for first-year students. And even for transfer students, the GPA numbers are also improving, and we also had a big jump for this year, fall of 2024, up to 3.2 GPA for transfer students. And the retention numbers are also looking really good, 96.4%. Next slide. Our academic notices or disqualification numbers are also looking improving. As you can see, the numbers are getting smaller compared to fall 22, fall 23, and fall 24, right? And so the disqualification number is also smaller at 213 on the right. And AVP Stefan Hyman added this next slide to show you more specifically, the gap between URM and non-URM. And we are closing the gap down to 4.6% now between the two lines for first-year students and down to 1.9% gap now for the transfer students. So those numbers are improving. And the next slide. As of this week, we received more than 120,000 applications. And Stefan thinks that we might hit even higher number of 121, 122. So we are very popular, as you can see. And the next slide shows you where our students are coming from and going. And as of this week, early admits about 14,800 we admitted, right? And the numbers look good. 4.14 GPA, mean GPA for the admitted students, and 43% students of color. And female ratio is about 64-35. That will probably settle down around 60-40 when we are all done. We finally got one student from West Virginia, so we cover all 50 states now. And we have one, but that the first one did not qualify. So now we finally have one. 50 state plus DC, Guam, and Puerto Rico, and from 60 different countries. So they are looking good. That's I think that's the last slide. That's all I have. Glad to answer questions.
Yes, we do have one hand raised. Chair Lack, you're recognized.
Thanks so much for this report, and big thanks to AVP Hyman for all the work that he and his team are doing to oversee our enrollment as we struggle to absorb a lot of the pressure of enrollment growth for the system. I'm going to repeat a request that I made at a Senate exec meeting, I think in the fall, but I'm not sure if you were at that meeting. I really do appreciate these regular reports on enrollment and tenure track hiring, but I'm wondering if you might take the opportunity in future Senate reports to share additional information connected to academic affairs. For instance, the state of contingent faculty hiring and contracts, particularly as we need to rely increasingly on them to compensate for the enrollment growth. Addressing our staffing concerns. We're grossly understaffed, I think, in every corner of this institution, and I don't know how how enrollment growth will impact them, as well as broader concerns about academics, with more than 24 programs being deactivated this year and likely more coming, potentially tied to low degree conferral. There's so much more to academic affairs than enrollment, retention, graduation, and higher faculty tenure track hiring. So I'd love if you could take the opportunity in future meetings to share other pieces of this complex puzzle so that we senators can get a more holistic understanding of all of the moving parts of academic affairs. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be glad to share more data. And in fact, we talk a lot about these at the two retreats we have last week with the chairs and directors. We have more than half a day for each session, and we cover all of those when we have all days within smaller groups to discuss all of that. So yes, I'll be glad to share more information. As far as you know, low conferral degree programs, as you know, almost a year ago, we received a list from the Board of Trustees, right? About 130 programs we have that they consider not having enough graduates every year, right? So we work on that list and set aside almost half of them as exempt because they are either ethnic studies or for a number of other reasons. We're not, we have to have them, right? Or either there are donor funded programs, so we set them aside. And then we had to justify the other half of the list. And so we asked all the departments and programs and schools to come up with action plans, right? And so a few of them look at those programs and decided, yeah, they were going to consolidate or they're going to pause. And then we submitted those action plans. Some, they say they're going to do other things, creative things, and see if they can recruit more students. So we talk about those things with chairs and directors, and because within another month or so, we have to submit our progress report, right, from what we submitted a year ago, and say what have we seen progress, right, on these programs. So the president and I have not asked anyone to just shut down programs, but we've been talking to them. If you have a realistic way to recruit other students, or even combine talking to other majors and other colleges, right? So we can maybe find new pool of student, or find ways to consolidate some of those programs. And so it's up to the chairs and directors and colleges to come up with ideas, and we'll go and discuss them with the chancellor's office, right? So that's where that is, and it's ongoing process, and we will continue to work on that.
Okay, thank you. And we have one other hand raised, and that's Senator Carter Curtis. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Butler-Byrd. And thank you for the report. I wanted to say thank you for getting the academic notice report that I had asked for at the executive committee on the URM students. But what was missing from the report, and I apologize if I might have missed it, is the disqualified, the URM numbers for the disqualified students, and then also the admitted in applications for the URM students. I wanted to see those numbers as well. Do you have that data, or?
Let me see, AVP Hyman might be online.
He was here a minute ago. I'm not sure if he is now.
Yeah, he might have those handy. If not, we'll find them. Okay, we'll find that information.
And thank you for your comments. We're going to go ahead and recognize AVP Mays for a report on lighting.
Thank you very much, Chair Butler-Byrd. Nice to see everyone. I hope everyone is having a great start to the semester. I was asked to come briefly speak and share on some concerns related to lighting on and around campus. And I had mentioned that there is a lighting committee that manages that. So I was just going to take a few minutes and share some background and context related to that working group. Proper and sufficient lighting throughout campus obviously is fundamental to our safety efforts, and it is a shared responsibility between a variety of campus stakeholders. Largely speaking, lighting on campus is managed and maintained by SDSU Facility Services. Facility Services has an evening shift electrician that focuses on and prioritizes addressing lighting that is non-operational or not functioning on campus. However, the entire electrical shop that supports all of campus participates in any needed repairs to expedite that process and keep our lighting around campus functional. When lighting projects are identified that are larger in nature, that work is managed by project management. That usually entails hiring outside contractors to construct and install new lighting apparatuses or much larger projects that facility services needs help from outside vendors. So how do we assess lighting needs on campus? In addition to the facility services electrician and the electrical shop, several years ago, we created a committee that we call the Night Walk. This is coordinated in conjunction with my office and the directors of facility services and project management. The Night Walk Committee is what we call ourselves and has probably been formalized maybe in the last 5 years. But it's a group of volunteers that participate in the annual Night Walk held in November of every year. The walk is led by facility services and project management and is designed to evaluate campus lighting and receive input from the community. So in order to capture a diverse group of our community, the group is approximately 33 people, and they're divided up into 3 different teams when we set out to do our night walk. Each team is assigned an area of campus that they walk and review. There are representatives in each of these 3 groups from University Police, Environmental Health and Safety, associated students, many student members of the Student Safety Committee, faculty, and staff. The group hears the valuable opinions and perspectives from the members of the group to get a good sense if the lighting in that particular area is inadequate or should be improved. This helps improve existing lighting and installing new lighting if needed. I can walk through some examples of what the committee has recommended in the past so you can get a general idea of how this works. If I'm able to share my screen, I can show you.
Okay, hold on a second. He's going to give you screen sharing permission.
My apologies. I should have given you all a heads up.
It'd be good.
Should be good now.
Okay, thank you. I do want to show you. So this is the latest tracking sheet for the recent November lighting walk. And you can see in here that the teams are broken up here in column F, team 1, team 2, team 3. Those are the teams that I talked about earlier. And within the certain beats or areas that they're assigned to, these are some of the recent things that they identified. So for example, if we look at Love Library, the north side along the storefront is dark, recommend additional lighting. So each team creates a report, they document it, they take photos, and this is just a sample of team 2 notes. So this is where they document how dark it is, they write a little quick justification, they mark it on a map, and then it is incorporated into this larger tracking sheet here that facility services and project management manage. So I know this is an evolving concern with respect to lighting in particular. Sometimes lighting will go out or it's malfunctioning or there's some type of electrical issue. Those will be addressed almost immediately through facility services and the night shift electrician who prioritizes fixing lighting. If you find lighting that is out of service or something that you need to report, if you haven't done so already, you can download the SDSU Safe app. And within that app, you can go to report incident. And at the bottom, it says facilities improvement, I think is what it says. And when you click on that, you can choose lighting, you can take a photo and submit it. That goes to facility services. So then they know pretty much in real time or maybe the following day that one of our community members has submitted some type of lighting concern. So it is integrated into the SDSU safety app. But I did want to share just that background and context, how it is a pretty large, diverse group across campus that volunteers every November. Anyone is invited. So if there's anyone on this call, I think Senator Weston was interested as well. We will reach out and extend that invitation for anyone who would like to participate in that walk. So I hope that answers a lot of the questions relating to lighting.
Thank you, AVP Mays. I'm not seeing any hands raised with any additional questions, so if anything comes up, we will follow up with you. Otherwise, thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you for your time. Bye-bye, everyone.